Hello, I'm Chef Patrick from the Culinary Institute of the Carolinas, and we're going to talk about mise en place. Mise en place is a personal and professional philosophy that's often used in kitchens and by kitchen professionals. When we talk about what a mise en place is, a mise en place translates to put in place or everything in its place. Again, organization. It refers to the preparation and assembly of all necessary ingredients and equipment for the production of a recipe or a menu or something that, again, we're working in a kitchen, maybe working in a station. There might be some mise en place associated with that, specific to that station. Purpose of a mise en place is to help keep you on task and keep you organized in the kitchen. And then a mise en place for us in our lab classes, it's a working paper document for you to use in the lab classes to help keep organized. When we look at this quote from Escoffier, we can learn another aspect to mise en place. And the quote about mise en place is these elementary preparations that are consistently resorted to during various steps of most culinary preparations. So if we're to look in the mise en place chapter of a culinary text, you might find things in there like clarified butter, our chopped garlic, herbs, several preparations that we would use during our cooking of multiple recipes. And that could be another way of looking at what mise en place is. It's your prep as a part of our preparations in our kitchen. When we talk about a paper mise en place that we're going to use in lab classes, there are 4 parts to a recipe mise en place, and we need to focus on these 4 parts. So for each assigned recipe, you're going to need the ingredients for the recipe, the method for the recipe, and you're going to need to also add equipment, so a list of equipment that we're going to need to prepare that recipe. And then lastly, the 4th part, CCP, which is critical control points, our CRP, critical recipe points. And we'll elaborate those in the next couple slides. Another part that we have in our paper mise en place is a timeline. So in a normal lab class, you might have 3 or 4 recipes, but you're going to have one timeline per lab class that's going to help you work organized. It's going to be a prep list, kind of consolidating and looking at multiple recipes and organizing that into a prep list. And again, it's going to allow us to work organized within the preparations of our production, the making of our recipes. Lastly, you're going to need 2 copies of your mise en place. You're going to need 1 copy for you to use in lab to work off of, and you're going to turn 1 copy into your instructor at the beginning of the class for grade. In addition to these components, there might be some other items that are needed or asked for in specific classes, like vocabulary or chapter questions. Maybe it's some alternatives to the recipe for diet, or substitutions. But in general, when we look at a mise en place, each recipe is going to have 4 parts. You're going to need a timeline, and you're going to need to print 2 copies, and you're going to turn 1 of those copies in. So let's talk about where we're going to find these recipes. Each week your instructor is going to post a rotation sheet that's going to tell you who your teammates are, because they often will change every week, and the rotation sheet is also going to tell you what your assigned recipes are. And when you look up your recipes in your lab packet, we're going to give you the ingredients and the methods for most of the recipes, but you're going to need to add to the ingredients and methods the equipment that's needed for putting together that recipe, the critical control points, and critical recipe points. So the ingredients, the method, the equipment, and your CCPs, that's going to make your 4 parts for each recipe. So let's look at these critical control points and critical recipe points. A critical control point, we're focusing on sanitation concerns with that recipe. We're focusing on, a product and its perishability and how we're going to hold that product out of the temperature danger zone. So if we're dealing with meat, dairy, or eggs, those are all products that we store under refrigeration, and we're concerned with our sanitation. That might require some ice to keep that product out of the temperature danger zone. It might be that we're focusing on the proper internal temperature for that product to be cooked to. So if we're cooking a poultry item, we would put in our critical control point that we're cooking that to 165 degrees, which is an internal temperature for poultry. Or we might talk about other sanitation concerns with storage. If we're dealing with protein, we need to make sure we're storing that properly so it's not going to generate cross contamination in a kitchen. It might also be something that just needs to be stored under refrigeration, like if we'd made a vinaigrette or salad dressing. Again, maybe something that doesn't contain a lot of potentially hazardous foods. We would still store that in the refrigerator for proper sanitation and quality of that product. The second part to this is a CRP, a critical recipe point. And this is going to be critical steps in the method that we want to pay attention to. Most of your recipes that we give you will already have a important note for a step in the process that we want you to pay particular attention to, or any cautionary kind of things you need to pay attention to. And those are things that you would add. So like it might be in a mixing process for cookies that we need to make sure that we cream the sugar and the fat together, and that we scrape the bowl and the paddle thoroughly so we don't have a chunk of butter that's going to incorporate in that cookie dough. It might be a part of a breading station that we have it in the proper order, and that in our methodology and the way we're working that we're paying attention to a critical part of it. It could be a part of a cooking process to make sure that in a recipe where it calls to sweat an ingredient, that we're not developing any color in that because we're cooking without color when we're sweating, or that when we're caramelizing something that we're focusing on color and not just sauteing it. Or basic preparation of keeping hot food hot and cold food cold. If we're cooking French fries and batch cooking them, how are we going to keep those French fries hot and crispy while we're cooking additional French fries? Or if we're serving something cold, again, how are we going to get that chilled down to the proper temperature and serve it cold? Those would be critical recipe points, things that you want to pay particular attention to that are going to affect the quality of that finished product. Let's talk about some common abbreviations that we would use in a typed mise en place. First one, PHF, potentially hazardous foods. So again, this is going to be a lot of times our meat, dairy, and egg products, things that would be stored in refrigeration and that tend to be highly perishable, or could lead to cross-contamination. That's what a PHF is. It's a potentially hazardous food, something we're concerned with. TDZ, temperature danger zone. So the temperature danger zone is the temperatures at which bacteria growth is the fastest, and so we're usually looking to keep foods either above the temperature danger zone by holding hot, or below the temperature danger zone by holding in refrigeration and or ice. RTE, ready to eat foods. These are foods that are either not going to be cooked or already cooked and they're ready to consume, and we're concerned with our personal sanitation and cross-contamination, that we're using a barrier device like tongs or gloves to handle these products so that we're not going to risk any kind of contamination with it, creating a possible foodborne illness. And then we've talked about critical control points and critical recipe points. But again, these abbreviations are commonly what we use in typing mise en place so that we can cut down on the additional words. And we all understand then what PHF, TDZ, RT, what those stand for as those abbreviations are used in our mise en place. Let's talk about a timeline. You're going to have, again, multiple recipes in a class. The purpose of the timeline is to help you work organized within the time constraints that we have in the class. So a timeline is going to be a prep list for what we're doing. What we need to take into consideration when we're creating a timeline is what needs to be done first, what can be done last, what can be multitasked, and then what our overall goals are in the finished product. We're putting together a dish that has multiple components. What has to be cooked in the beginning to be ready because maybe it has a long cook time. What's something that we can do as busy work to help prepare a recipe, and maybe what's something that's critical in the end, like adding some fresh basil to our dish at the end so it's going to maintain the quality and the color that we want. What's often included into a timeline is kind of your Hail Mary or your fire time, meaning that what are some critical times that we have to get things cooking for those products to be done. You know, if we were baking potatoes for a baked potato, we know generically that's going to take maybe an hour to cook. Well, if we're an hour out from service and those potatoes aren't in the oven, they're not going to be done. You know, and so we would put in a part of our mise en place, you know, part of our timeline that it's our fire time for those potatoes need to be an hour out from service. Yeah, because if it's 30 minutes out from service, potatoes aren't cooking, we're not going to have potatoes. We're going to have to make some kind of alternative plan to be successful with that. So, you know, a lot of chefs and preparations in your timeline are going to ask you to incorporate, you know, what your fire times are, you know, what are the important critical times that we need to focus on to make sure that we're not just behind in our prep, but that our food's going to be done when it needs to be done. Just a second to elaborate on some specific items that might be needed by particular classes. So it's not uncommon for classes to require vocabulary, and those vocabulary words would be turned in with the definitions as a part of your mise en place. You know, many classes where we're doing plate presentation might require a sketch, you know, on a particular plate form that might give top and side profiles of your plate diagram. And this needs to be an earnest attempt by the student to display their understanding and their thoughts about their plate presentation. And so, you know, we're not looking to have a computer-generated plate presentation there, because you're going to put a lot of effort into something that's not going to show the flow that's needed in your plate presentation. You know, and for the most part, we're not allowing actual pictures unless we're needing those for ideas. Third bullet, you know, you might be required to incorporate a different dietary variation to that recipe. So like if we're needing a vegetarian option for a dish that you're creating, or a gluten-free option for the dish that you're creating, that might be a class-specific item that's needed for that. And then there might be a class that you're taking where you're turning in chapter questions, you know, questions and answers maybe from the end of a chapter as a part of your mise en place, turned in as a part of your weekly mise en place. Here we see a couple examples of mise en place. On the left-hand side, we have a Bloody Mary aspic terrine. You know, this is often included in the handouts packet of the Intro to Baking and Intro to Culinary classes. And we'll see just briefly in this that there are 4 bolded parts in here. The ingredients, the method, we come down to a list of equipment, and then the bottom here, critical control points. You know, on the right, we see an example of mise en place from a bake shop class, to where same thing. We see the ingredients, the method, the equipment list needed, the critical control points, and then also a little timeline. And in this case, bake shops meet 2 days a week, and so their timeline is split into 2 days, whereas most classes that meet 1 day a week, you would just write one timeline for that week of class. You know, mise en place is a working document, so you need to make sure that when you're typing it and putting together the font size, the layout, all those things, it's important to have the core information there, but that it's going to be legible and it's going to be of an appropriate size font for you to use in the kitchen, because this is, again, a document that you're using in the kitchen for preparing the food that you're assigned. So as a reminder, you need a pair of mise en place per class. You're going to need 2 mise en place per class. If you don't have that, that's certainly going to negatively affect your preparation for class and perhaps your grade.
Next, we look back on a story that's right for today. Some of us surely have made New Year's resolutions to get more organized.
Steve, did you make that resolution?
I hope that you are thinking 4 parts.
I think so. Let me just check my list of resolutions. Where is that list?
Yeah, maybe you didn't. Well, you need to. Well, many of us are feeling a little disorganized this time of year, and we're so disappointed in our own performance that Americans spend nearly $10 billion a year on self-help and personal organization products. Now it turns out you may be able to get some tips from the highly organized kitchens at culinary schools. Here's reporter Dan Charnas.
You need 2 copies.
All right, everyone, here we go. Friday night, Saturday night.
A restaurant is organized chaos. Every day in kitchens across the country like this one at Chef Rob Halpern's Marigold restaurant in Philadelphia, chefs and cooks have little room for error.
Order in, table for 4. Please fire popcorn for 4.
Communication and organization are crucial. A ticket comes in.
This table's going to do 4 asparagus, 3 quails with 1 vegetarian egg.
Like a chef.
When the crew is ready with an item,
4 Dippin' Dots.
Heard that. Food runner, please. 4 dots are for table 36.
then a server grabs the order.
36 wogs.
This complex call and call back routine is only one part of a larger philosophy of organization and readiness. It's called Mise en Place. Melissa Gray, a senior at the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, describes the system that makes kitchens go.
Mise en place, it really is a way of life. I know people that have it tattooed on them. It's a way of concentrating your mind to only focus on the aspects that you need to be working on at that moment to kind of rid yourself of distractions.
Mise en place translates literally from the French as put in place, and CIA students like Alexandra Tibbetts often find the work habits they learn in the kitchen extend beyond it.
You mise en place your life. You set up your books for class, you set up your chef whites, your shoes are shined, you know, everything that you need every step of the day.
Now, it starts with your list.
Wiley Dufresne is a James Beard Award-winning chef and owner of New York restaurants WD-50 and Alder.
What I used to do, let's say I had 23 items on my list, and I knew that I had 23 items of mise en place I had to do every day. So I would take a pad, and I'd write them all down on the way home. And then I'd crumple the list up and throw it out. On my way to work, I'd write the list again. And you become one with your list. You and the list are the same, because the list is scorched into your head.
The key to mise en place is not so much the list, but the preparation mindset. Cooks can easily do 6 hours of prep for a 3-hour dinner shift.
Escargot coming. There'll be 2 pigs.
Mise en place forces cooks to account for every minute of their time and, says Chef Dwayne LaPuma, an instructor at the CIA, every movement.
Every component of one single dish is in one single corner, so their hand literally moves inches. Once they set up their station, I should be able to blindfold them, okay, and tell them pick up that dish. And they should know that their tongs are always here, their oil is always right here, their salt and pepper is always right here. When they turn around and their back is to it, they literally could take their hand back and know exactly where it is, so they could just pick it on up. Literally, they always have one foot pivoted, just like a basketball player.
Ordinary, or the chicken, or the rambo.
At Manhattan Theater District restaurant Esca, sous chef Greg Barr sets up his station.
Got all my tools up here. I've got some cured meats. I've got all my vegetables cooked, ready to go.
Barr describes what is perhaps the central tenet of mise en place, working clean.
It's a very zen-like thing for me. You're so in the moment that, like, you don't have stuff from the past. I don't have something from this morning here. Everything's been cleaned down. All my knives are clean cutting board, clear space to work, clear mind.
Working clean in the kitchen is paramount because unclean food is dangerous. People can get sick. Chef Wiley Dufresne illustrates another crucial step in mise en place, clean as you go.
Oh my God, if you don't clean as you go, it's a mess. And that's another thing that you people at home could do, because isn't the worst thing at the end of a dinner party doing a bunch of dishes? Wouldn't you rather honestly break them all and buy new ones? You would, I know you would. It actually saves time to clean as you go. It makes life so much easier.
Let's go 1 and 1, please, to 2-4. Seat 2 gets the veg. 3-4, seat 2 gets the veg. Pick up.
Across town at the restaurant Telepan Local, chef owner Bill Telepan explains another principle, slowing down to speed up.
I always say, look, I'd rather you take an extra minute or two and slow up service to get it right, because the 1 minute behind you are now is going to become 6 minutes behind because we're going to have to redo the plate.
Upstairs in the kitchen, this issue plays out as Telepan coaches a new cook on how to make, of all things, a grilled cheese sandwich.
That's not done. Fire another one. Be patient. I know it's a grilled cheese sandwich, but it's got to be a great grilled cheese sandwich, you know what I mean?
Some chefs say that mise en place is nothing more than a kitchen version of good old-fashioned military discipline. After all, the rigid culinary hierarchy codified in the 19th century by Georges Escoffier is called the brigade system. Today, André Soltner is one of the world's most revered chefs and dean of the International Culinary Center in New York City.
A chef, because of mise en place, he's always on time.
He demands the same kind of efficiency outside his kitchen.
I go crazy if I go to the doctor, and if he's not ready, I leave. And that's because of mise en place.
Other chefs, like Ari Bakovza of New York's The Harrison, admit that this can make domestic life a little intense.
We spend so many hours here that the way we are at work starts to translate into the way we are at home. You wish that you could switch it off, and you hope that you can. But I mean, if you ask my girl, how is Ari at home, she'll tell you he's a nut job. You can't sit still.
But practice at its highest level. Mise en place says that time is precious, resources are precious, space is precious, your self-respect and the respect of others are precious. Use them wisely. Isn't that a philosophy for our time? Chef Dwayne LaPuma.
The world is a giant gerbil wheel right now. I think if we just became a little bit more organized, a little bit more mise en place, understood what we really need, and only do what we really need, I think we'll have more time. You'll be able to sit down at the table with your kids and actually cook a meal. Get up a little bit earlier so you can breathe. You want to greet the day.
Because sometimes what we need to excel is not so much a new system, but a new metaphor. For NPR News, I'm Dan Charnas.
Lastly, be a superstar, you know? If you follow these mise en place guidelines, you're going to be a good teammate, and your chef's going to be happy with you because you're going to be prepared for class, you know? And everybody will appreciate your preparation. So, you know, follow these guidelines in preparing your mise en place. Understand it's a working document that's going to help plan and prepare you for success in lab each week. Congratulations.